You might think medieval winemakers spent their days stomping grapes and singing cheerful songs in sunny vineyards, but their real work happened in places where the sun never shone. Deep beneath the rolling hills of Europe, these craftsmen carved out a hidden world that would make modern wine collectors weep with envy. We're talking about vast underground networks of tunnels and chambers where the most valuable wines in medieval society aged in perfect silence and darkness. Picture this. You're a wealthy merchant in 14th century Burgundy, and your livelihood depends on liquid gold stored in wooden barrels. But here's the catch. Wine back then was worth more than most people's annual salary, and everyone from bandits to rival merchants wanted to get their hands on it. So, what do? You go underground, literally carving your wine storage into the bedrock itself. These weren't just simple caves either. We're talking about sophisticated tunnel systems that stretched for miles beneath some of Europe's most famous wine regions. The numbers alone tell an incredible story. In Champagne, France, archaeologists have mapped over 120 miles of interconnected tunnels dating back to medieval times. That's enough underground passageway to stretch from Paris to Reims, all carved by hand, one chisel strike at a time. Some of these tunnel networks had multiple levels, with the deepest chambers reaching 80 feet below ground. Imagine the dedication it took to haul tons of stone up from those depths, using nothing but rope and muscle power. But why go to all this trouble? The answer lies in what medieval winemakers discovered about the perfect aging environment. These underground chambers maintained a constant temperature of around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. While surface temperatures could swing from scorching summers to freezing winters, the wine resting in these tunnels experienced the kind of stable climate that modern wineries spend fortunes trying to recreate with climate control systems. The geology itself became part of the winemaking process. Medieval craftsmen weren't just digging random holes, they were reading the earth like a book, understanding which types of rock would provide the best conditions for their precious cargo. Limestone became their material of choice, not just because it was relatively easy to carve, but because it naturally regulated humidity. The porous stone would absorb excess moisture during wet periods and release it during dry spells, creating what amounted to a natural humidifier system. One fascinating detail that often gets overlooked is how these tunnels were actually carved. The work began during winter months when vineyard activities slowed down. Entire families would disappear underground for weeks at a time, working by candlelight to expand their subterranean wine cellars. The process was backbreaking. Every cubic foot of space had to be chiseled out by hand, and the debris carried to the surface in baskets. Some tunnel systems took generations to complete, with fathers passing down half-finished chambers to their sons along with the family winemaking secrets. The most successful medieval winemakers became expert tunnel architects. They understood that air circulation was crucial, so they designed ventilation shafts that allowed fresh air to flow through the chambers without disturbing the wine's aging process. These weren't random holes punched in the ceiling either. The ventilation systems followed specific patterns, often spiraling upward through the rock to prevent outside air from rushing directly into the storage areas. But here's where things get really interesting and slightly dangerous. These tunnel networks weren't just about wine storage. They became medieval highways of commerce, connecting vineyards, monasteries, and trading centers across vast distances. Some tunnels had multiple entrances hidden throughout the countryside, allowing winemakers to transport their goods in complete secrecy. Rival merchants might spend years trying to figure out how their competitors were moving wine so efficiently without ever using the main roads. The construction techniques varied dramatically across different regions. In Burgundy, winemakers carved their tunnels directly into chalky limestone, creating chambers with smooth, almost polished walls. The Champagne region developed a different approach, creating wider tunnels with arched ceilings that could accommodate larger groups of workers. German winemakers along the Rhine carved their cellars into slate and sandstone, often following natural fault lines in the rock to minimize the digging required. Security was always a major concern. These underground wine stores represented enormous wealth, and medieval Europe wasn't exactly known for its peaceful times. Winemakers developed ingenious methods to protect their investments. Some tunnels had false walls that could hide entire chambers full of wine barrels. Others included narrow passages that could only be navigated by someone who knew the exact route, a medieval version of a combination lock made from stone corridors. The most elaborate tunnel systems included living quarters where guards could stay for weeks at a time. These underground apartments came complete with sleeping areas, food storage, and even primitive toilet facilities. One tunnel system in France reportedly had a fully functional kitchen carved into the bedrock, allowing security crews to prepare meals without ever surfacing. Talk about dedication to your job. Imagine spending months underground just to make sure nobody steals the wine. Water management became another crucial engineering challenge. Underground chambers naturally collected moisture, but too much humidity could ruin wine just as surely as too little. Medieval tunnel builders developed sophisticated drainage systems, carving channels along the floors that would direct excess water away from the wine storage areas. Some systems were so effective that they're still functioning today, nearly 1,000 years later. The tools these medieval engineers used were surprisingly sophisticated. While they didn't have modern machinery, they developed specialized chisels for different types of rock, hammers with specific weights for different tasks, and measuring devices that helped them maintain consistent tunnel dimensions. Some winemaking families guarded their tunnel building techniques as closely as their wine recipes, passing down knowledge about rock types, construction methods, and maintenance procedures through generations. Perhaps most remarkably, these tunnel builders had to work around the existing landscape without modern surveying equipment. They used simple but effective methods like weighted strings and water levels to ensure their tunnels maintained proper grades for drainage. Some tunnel systems included chambers positioned to take advantage of natural springs, providing fresh water for cleaning barrels and equipment. The scale of these operations varied wildly depending on the wealth and ambition of their builders. Small family vineyards might have simple tunnel systems extending just a few hundred feet from their main cellars. But the major wine-producing monasteries and noble estates created underground complexes that rivaled modern subway systems in their complexity and scope. The famous Abbey of Saint-Denis near Paris reportedly had tunnels that connected to wine storage facilities over 5 miles away. These weren't just storage spaces either. The tunnels served as workshops where coopers crafted barrels, where wine was blended and bottled, and where the complex chemistry of fermentation could proceed undisturbed by the chaos of medieval daily life. Some chambers were specifically designed for different stages of the winemaking process, with separate areas for fermenting, aging, and final preparation before sale. The investment required to create these tunnel systems was staggering. Historical records suggest that some major wine estates spent the equivalent of decades' worth of profits just on excavation and construction. But the payoff was enormous. Wine aged in these perfect conditions could command prices 10 times higher than wine stored in conventional surface cellars. The financial gamble of tunnel construction paid off in ways medieval winemakers never expected. Wine stored in these underground chambers developed flavors that surface-stored wine simply couldn't match. The constant temperature and humidity created ideal conditions for what we now know as malolactic fermentation, a secondary process that softened harsh acids and created more complex flavor profiles. Medieval wine drinkers couldn't explain the science, but they knew tunnel-aged wine tasted better, and they were willing to pay premium prices for it. But maintaining these underground networks required constant vigilance and specialized knowledge. The tunnels needed regular cleaning to prevent mold and bacteria from contaminating the wine. Workers would descend with brushes and vinegar solutions, scrubbing every surface by torchlight. The job was so unpleasant that many wine estates hired dedicated tunnel maintenance crews who spent their entire careers working in these subterranean spaces. The most dangerous part wasn't the physical labor, It was the air quality. Medieval tunnel workers didn't understand carbon dioxide poisoning, but they knew that spending too long in certain chambers could make you dizzy or worse. They developed a buddy system where workers always traveled in pairs, and they learned to recognize the warning signs when chambers needed fresh air circulation. Some tunnel systems had dead-end chambers that became completely unusable because of poor air quality, turning into expensive mistakes carved in stone. Weather patterns above ground directly affected conditions in the tunnels below. Heavy rains could flood lower chambers, while extended dry periods might cause humidity levels to drop dangerously low. Experienced tunnel masters learned to read seasonal changes and adjust their wine storage accordingly. They moved barrels to different chambers based on the time of year, essentially creating a rotating system that maximized each wine's exposure to ideal conditions. The social dynamics around these tunnel systems were fascinating. Access to the best underground storage became a mark of status among medieval wine producers. Wealthy merchants would boast about the depth of their tunnels or the quality of their limestone chambers. Some producers formed cooperative agreements, sharing tunnel construction costs and maintenance duties. These partnerships often lasted for generations, creating business relationships that were literally built on solid rock. Theft remained a constant concern, leading to increasingly creative security measures. Some winemakers installed heavy stone doors that required multiple people to open, effectively preventing solo thieves from making off with valuable wine. Others created decoy chambers filled with inferior wine, hoping thieves would grab the obvious targets and miss the really valuable stuff hidden deeper in the tunnel system. One clever producer in Burgundy reportedly carved false tunnel entrances that led nowhere, wasting the time and energy of would-be wine pirates. The tunnel networks also served unexpected purposes during times of war and political upheaval. When armies swept through wine regions, these underground chambers became shelters for entire families. Some tunnel systems included emergency food stores and weapons caches, transforming wine cellars into medieval panic rooms. Historical records mention several instances where local populations survived sieges by hiding in wine tunnels, sustained by stored food and, presumably, plenty of wine to keep their spirits up. Communication within these vast tunnel systems became an art form itself. Workers developed systems of whistles and calls that could carry through stone corridors, allowing them to coordinate activities across different chambers. Some tunnels had acoustic properties that made whispers audible from surprising distances, a phenomenon that tunnel workers learned to exploit for both practical communication and, occasionally, eavesdropping on competitors who might be touring the facilities. The construction process revealed fascinating insights about medieval understanding of structural engineering. Tunnel builders learned through trial and error which ceiling heights would remain stable over time and which wall thicknesses could support the weight of the earth above. Some early tunnel systems collapsed spectacularly, burying wine and sometimes workers beneath tons of rubble. These disasters led to more sophisticated construction techniques, including the use of wooden support beams and stone arches that distributed weight more effectively. Lighting these underground spaces presented unique challenges. Candles and torches created fire hazards in chambers filled with alcohol vapors, leading to occasional explosive accidents that could destroy entire wine collections. Some tunnel systems switched to oil lamps with protective glass covers, while others developed reflective systems using polished metal surfaces to amplify available light. The most sophisticated operations created light wells, carefully positioned openings that brought natural sunlight into specific chambers without compromising temperature control. The economic impact of these tunnel systems extended far beyond individual wine producers. Entire communities grew up around major tunnel networks, with specialized trades emerging to support the underground wine industry. Stone carvers, barrel makers, tunnel maintenance crews, and security guards all found steady employment in the tunnel economy. Some towns became known specifically for their tunnel building expertise, exporting their knowledge to wine regions across Europe. Quality control in these underground facilities required new techniques and tools. winemakers developed methods for testing wine quality in low-light conditions, learning to judge color, clarity, and fermentation progress by feel and smell rather than sight. They created specialized tools for sampling wine from barrels stacked in narrow tunnel chambers, including long-handled devices that could reach barrels positioned against tunnel walls. The tunnel systems also influenced the development of medieval wine transportation. Barrels aged in underground chambers needed to be moved carefully to preserve their contents, leading to innovations in cart design and road construction. Some tunnel systems included underground loading docks, where wine could be transferred directly to specially designed transport vehicles without ever exposing the barrels to surface temperature fluctuations. Disease prevention became another crucial consideration in tunnel management. The damp, enclosed environments could harbor bacteria and fungi that would ruin wine or make it dangerous to drink. Medieval tunnel operators developed cleaning protocols using herbs, vinegar, and smoke treatments to sanitize their chambers. Some systems included dedicated quarantine areas where suspicious barrels could be isolated until their contents could be properly evaluated. The most ingenious tunnel operators figured out how to use the Earth's natural cooling properties for more than just wine storage. They discovered that different types of rock conducted heat at different rates, allowing them to create temperature zones within the same tunnel system. Chambers carved into dense limestone stayed cooler than those cut through softer chalk, giving winemakers the ability to age different wines at slightly different temperatures without building separate facilities. But here's where medieval tunnel construction gets really wild. Some winemakers started connecting their systems to natural underground rivers and streams. Not for drinking water, mind you, but for temperature regulation. They'd carve channels that allowed groundwater to flow beneath their wine storage areas, creating a primitive but effective cooling system. The flowing water would carry away excess heat during warm months, while providing thermal mass during winter. One tunnel system in the Loire Valley reportedly used an underground stream to power a primitive ventilation fan made from carved wooden paddles. The connection between geology and wine flavor became an obsession for the most successful medieval producers. They learned that wine stored in chambers carved from different rock types developed distinct characteristics. Limestone chambers produced wines with what they described as mineral notes, while sandstone storage areas seemed to create smoother, rounder flavors. Some producers became so convinced of these effects that they would move barrels between different rock chambers during the aging process, essentially using geology as a flavoring technique. Storage organization in these tunnel systems would put modern warehouses to shame. Medieval winemakers developed complex labeling systems using carved symbols, painted marks, and even rope knots to identify different wines, vintages, and quality levels. They created detailed maps of their tunnel layouts, showing which chambers contained which wines and when they should be moved or sold. These maps were often more closely guarded than the wine recipes themselves. Losing track of your inventory in a maze of underground tunnels was a fast way to go bankrupt. The barrel-making process itself was revolutionized by tunnel storage. Coopers discovered that barrels aged in underground chambers required different construction techniques than those stored on the surface. The constant humidity meant that wood joints needed to be sealed more carefully, while the stable temperatures allowed for tighter barrel construction that would have cracked under surface temperature swings. Some tunnel systems included dedicated coopering workshops, where barrels were built, repaired, and maintained in the same environment where they'd spend their working lives. Seasonal timing became crucial for tunnel operations. Spring was wine-moving season, when the previous year's harvest was transferred from fermentation chambers to long-term aging areas. Summer meant maintenance work, scrubbing chambers, replacing damaged supports, and expanding storage capacity. Fall brought the new harvest and the frantic activity of preparing chambers for fresh wine. Winter was planning season, when tunnel masters would design expansions and repairs for the following year. The social hierarchy within tunnel operations was surprisingly complex. Master tunnel builders held positions of enormous respect, often earning more than skilled craftsmen in other trades. Below them were the chamber specialists who understood the nuances of different storage environments. Tunnel maintenance crews formed their own guild-like organizations, sharing knowledge about ventilation, humidity control, and structural repairs. Even the wine tasters who evaluated tunnel-stored wine developed specialized skills for judging quality in low-light conditions. Competition between tunnel operators led to some remarkable innovations. Rival winemakers would tour each other's facilities, always looking for techniques they could adapt or improve. This informal technology transfer resulted in rapid improvements in tunnel design, with successful innovations spreading across wine regions within a few years. Some producers became so secretive about their methods that they required visitors to be blindfolded when entering certain chambers. The business model around tunnel wine storage created entirely new economic relationships. Wealthy merchants who couldn't afford their own tunnel systems would rent space from established producers, paying premium prices for access to the best aging environments. Some tunnel owners became essentially wine storage banks, offering secure, climate-controlled storage for a percentage of the wine's value. These arrangements often included insurance clauses. If wine was damaged or stolen while in tunnel storage, the facility owner would compensate the wine's owner. Transport logistics for tunnel-stored wine required careful planning and specialized equipment. Moving heavy barrels through narrow underground passages demanded custom-built carts with low profiles and multiple wheels for stability. Some tunnel systems included primitive elevator systems using pulleys and counterweights to move wine between different levels. The most sophisticated operations had underground loading areas where wine could be transferred directly to surface transport without temperature shock. Quality assessment in tunnel environments led to the development of new wine evaluation techniques. Tasters learned to judge wine by touch, feeling the barrel's surface temperature and vibration patterns to assess fermentation progress. They developed heightened senses of smell to detect off flavors in low-light conditions. Some master tasters claimed they could identify which specific tunnel chamber a wine had been aged in just by tasting it, a skill that modern wine experts would find impressive even today. The tunnel systems also created unexpected opportunities for food preservation. Winemakers discovered that the same conditions perfect for aging wine were also ideal for storing cheese, cured meats, and other valuable foods. Some tunnel operations became multi-purpose storage facilities, with different chambers dedicated to different products. The income from food storage often helped finance tunnel expansion and maintenance, creating diversified underground businesses. Labor management in tunnel operations required unique skills. Workers needed to be comfortable in confined spaces, able to work by limited light, and physically strong enough to handle heavy barrels in awkward positions. Some tunnel systems employed workers year-round, while others relied on seasonal labor during harvest and maintenance periods. The most experienced tunnel workers could navigate complex underground networks in complete darkness, using their hands and memory to find their way through miles of passages. Accidents in tunnel systems, while rare, could be catastrophic. Cave-ins would bury workers and wine alike, while flooding could destroy years of carefully aged inventory in hours. Some tunnel operators developed elaborate emergency procedures, including escape routes, emergency supplies, and rescue protocols. The worst recorded tunnel accident occurred in Germany in 1387, when a structural collapse destroyed over 10,000 barrels of wine and killed 3 workers, a disaster that led to new construction standards across the region. The influence of these tunnel systems extended beyond wine production into medieval architecture, and engineering techniques developed for wine tunnel construction were adapted for building foundations, castle dungeons, and even early mining operations. Some tunnel builders became general contractors, applying their underground expertise to other construction projects. The knowledge base created by wine tunnel construction contributed to broader advances in medieval engineering and construction techniques. Religious communities played a surprising role in tunnel wine storage development. Many monasteries operated extensive tunnel systems, not just for their own wine production, but as commercial storage facilities for local producers. Monastic communities had the long-term stability and financial resources needed for major tunnel projects, plus the disciplined workforce required for consistent maintenance. Some of the most sophisticated tunnel systems in medieval Europe were built and operated by religious orders who treated wine storage as a form of stewardship. The evolution of tunnel design over centuries shows remarkable innovation within technological constraints. Early systems were simple excavations with minimal support structures. Later developments included sophisticated drainage, ventilation, and structural support systems that rival modern engineering in their effectiveness. The most advanced medieval tunnel systems incorporated multiple levels, specialized chambers for different functions, and integrated transportation networks that moved wine efficiently from production to market. Documentation of tunnel operations provides fascinating insights into medieval business practices. Detailed records show inventory tracking systems, maintenance schedules, and quality control procedures that demonstrate sophisticated management techniques. Some tunnel operators maintained records for decades, creating databases of information about wine aging, storage conditions, and market performance that would be valuable to modern producers. The legacy of these medieval tunnel systems continues to influence wine production today, with many modern wineries built on the foundations of ancient underground networks that still provide ideal storage conditions centuries after their original construction. The psychological effects of working in these underground environments were something medieval tunnel operators had to manage carefully. Spending months in dimly lit chambers carved from solid rock could drive workers to the edge of sanity. Some tunnel systems developed rotation schedules to prevent what they called tunnel madness, a condition where workers would start talking to the wine barrels or claiming they could hear voices in the stone walls. The smart operators learned that a worker who'd been underground too long was more dangerous than helpful, often making costly mistakes or abandoning their posts entirely. Communication between different tunnel levels became an art form that would impress modern engineers. Workers discovered that certain types of rock carried sound better than others, leading to the development of acoustic channels carved specifically for relaying messages. These sound tunnels allowed supervisors on the surface to communicate with workers 3 levels down, coordinating activities across vast underground networks without anyone having to climb hundreds of feet of ladder systems. Some facilities had designated caller positions, workers whose only job was to relay messages through the acoustic network. The economic ripple effects of tunnel wine storage reached into every aspect of medieval commerce. Insurance systems developed around tunnel-stored wine, with merchants paying premiums to protect against cave-ins, floods, and theft. These early insurance policies were incredibly detailed, specifying exactly which types of damage were covered and under what conditions. Some policies even included clauses about wine quality degradation, compensating owners if their tunnel-stored wine failed to meet expected standards after aging. Tunnel construction created its own specialized vocabulary that spread throughout medieval Europe. Words for different rock types, tunnel shapes, and construction techniques became part of the common language in wine regions. A master tunnel builder could walk into any wine-producing area and be understood when discussing excavation depths, ventilation requirements, or structural support needs. This technical language became so standardized that construction contracts from different countries used remarkably similar terminology. The most ambitious tunnel projects required financial backing that rivaled major construction projects like cathedrals or castles. Some wine estates borrowed against future harvests for decades to finance tunnel expansion, essentially mortgaging their production capacity to build better storage facilities. These investments were incredibly risky. A few bad harvests or a tunnel collapse could bankrupt families that had been successful for generations. But the potential rewards were enormous enough that the risks seemed worthwhile. Regional variations in tunnel construction reflected local geology and cultural preferences in fascinating ways. Northern European tunnels tended to be deeper and more heavily insulated, designed to maintain consistent temperatures despite harsh winter conditions. Mediterranean tunnel systems were often shallower, but included more sophisticated ventilation to handle intense summer heat. Some regions developed signature architectural features: arched ceilings in France, rectangular chambers in Germany, and circular storage rooms in parts of Italy. The role of women in tunnel operations was more significant than historical records initially suggested. While men typically handled the heavy excavation work, women often managed the day-to-day operations of wine storage, monitoring fermentation progress, organizing inventory, and maintaining quality control standards. Some tunnel systems employed female tasters whose palates were considered more sensitive than their male counterparts. These women developed expertise that was crucial to the success of tunnel operations. Though their contributions were often overlooked in official records, tunnel maintenance required tools and techniques that were constantly evolving. Workers developed specialized equipment for different tasks: narrow shovels for cleaning drainage channels, long-handled brushes for scrubbing chamber walls, and custom-designed ladders for accessing different tunnel levels. Some tools were so specialized that they were only useful in tunnel environments, leading to the development of tool-making craftsmen who served exclusively the underground wine industry. The impact of political changes on tunnel operations reveals how deeply these systems were integrated into medieval society. During wars, tunnel entrances would be concealed or deliberately collapsed to prevent enemy forces from accessing valuable wine stores. Some tunnel systems included defensive features: narrow passages that could be easily blocked, hidden chambers that could shelter defenders, and even weapon storage areas. The most paranoid tunnel builders created multiple escape routes and emergency supply caches. Training programs for tunnel workers became increasingly sophisticated as the industry matured. Master tunnel builders would take on apprentices, teaching them not just excavation techniques, but also geology, structural engineering, and wine storage principles. These apprenticeships could last for years, with trainees gradually working their way up from basic laborer to specialized craftsmen. The most successful apprentices might eventually become tunnel masters themselves, commanding high wages and respect throughout the wine industry. Seasonal rhythms governed tunnel operations in ways that affected entire communities. Spring tunnel cleaning employed dozens of workers for weeks at a time, providing crucial income during slow agricultural periods. Summer expansion projects required skilled stoneworkers, carpenters, and laborers. Autumn harvest preparation involved moving and reorganizing thousands of barrels. Winter planning sessions brought tunnel masters together to share techniques and plan improvements for the following year. The development of tunnel-specific medical knowledge addressed health problems unique to underground work. Tunnel workers suffered from respiratory issues caused by stone dust, joint problems from working in cramped spaces, and eye strain from working in dim light. Some communities developed herbal remedies specifically for tunnel-related ailments, while others established medical specialists who understood the unique health challenges of underground labor. Record-keeping systems for tunnel operations became incredibly sophisticated, rivaling the accounting methods used by major trading companies. Detailed logs tracked which wines were stored in which chambers, when they were moved, and how they were performing during aging. These records allowed tunnel operators to optimize their storage strategies, identifying which locations produced the best results for different types of wine. Some record systems were so detailed that modern historians can reconstruct exact storage layouts and wine inventories from centuries ago. The relationship between tunnel design and wine quality became an obsession for the most successful producers. They experimented with different chamber shapes, ceiling heights, and wall textures to determine which configurations produced the best aging results. Some producers carved test chambers with different specifications, aging identical wines in each location to compare results. These experiments led to increasingly refined tunnel designs, optimized for specific types of wine production. Transportation networks, connecting different tunnel systems, created underground highways that facilitated regional wine trade. Some tunnel complexes were connected by passages that allowed wine to be moved between facilities without ever reaching the surface. These underground trade routes were so extensive that merchants could transport wine across entire regions, while avoiding roads, taxes, and potential theft. The most ambitious networks included rest stations, supply depots, and even underground inns for traveling merchants. The environmental impact of tunnel construction was carefully managed by medieval standards. Excavated stone was used for construction projects, road building, and other infrastructure needs. Some communities built entire buildings from stone removed during tunnel construction. The most environmentally conscious tunnel builders would replant disturbed areas above their excavations, understanding that maintaining surface vegetation helped prevent erosion and structural problems in the tunnels below. Innovation in tunnel construction continued throughout the medieval period, with each generation of builders improving on previous techniques. Later tunnel systems included features like integrated workshops, specialized fermentation chambers, and even primitive climate control systems using airflow management. The most advanced facilities incorporated lessons learned from centuries of tunnel building, creating storage environments that were remarkably sophisticated given the available technology. The social status associated with owning or operating tunnel systems created new forms of medieval prestige. Successful tunnel masters were invited to noble courts, consulted on major construction projects, and sometimes granted land or titles in recognition of their expertise. Some tunnel builders became wealthy enough to commission their own wine estates, applying their underground storage expertise to compete with their former employers. The most famous tunnel masters were known throughout Europe, their reputations spreading along the same trade routes that carried their tunnel-stored wines. These medieval tunnel systems represent one of history's most impressive examples of turning necessity into innovation. What started as desperate attempts to protect valuable wine from thieves and spoilage evolved into sophisticated underground networks that revolutionized an entire industry. The winemakers who carved these chambers weren't just storing their products. They were literally reshaping the earth to create perfect aging environments that modern technology still struggles to replicate. The legacy of these tunnel builders extends far beyond wine production. Their techniques influenced medieval architecture, engineering, and even urban planning. Many European cities today sit above networks of tunnels that began as wine storage facilities, later adapted for everything from transportation to wartime shelters. The stone removed from these excavations built churches, castles, and city walls that still stand today. Perhaps most remarkably, many of these tunnel systems are still functioning after nearly 1,000 years. Modern wineries across Europe continue to use chambers carved by medieval craftsmen, testament to both the quality of their construction and the timeless principles of proper wine storage. The next time you taste a fine wine, remember that its complex flavors might have been shaped in darkness, silence, and secrecy. In chambers where medieval workers toiled by candlelight to create something extraordinary from solid rock.